All set.
Perfect. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Today is Thursday, August 5th. This is the Concord Middle School Building Committee meeting, and it's approximately 7:30 a.m. And we are going to get this meeting underway. I will take roll call. Jared Stanton.
Present.
Thank you, Jared. Matt Johnson.
Present.
Good morning, Matt. Lori Hunter.
Yes.
Thank you, Lori. Justin Cameron.
Good morning.
Good morning, John Harris.
Here.
Thanks, John. Russ Hughes.
Here.
Hey, Russ. Peter Pachelis. Peter with us? I know he's planning on joining. I don't see him quite yet. Court Booth.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Heather Bout.
Here, good morning.
Good morning. Heather, you're still with us for the for the record until
Yes.
Yes, so I see Alexa's on as well. Good morning, Alexa. Thank you for listening and participating. So I believe the select board meeting is in the next week or two. Matt could probably confirm, but Heather is still officially on our committee, and Alexa's listening for the sake of her own information, and the formalities of that exchange will happen fairly soon. Frank Cannon.
Here.
Good morning, Frank. Chris Popoff.
Here.
Hi, Chris. Charlie Parker.
Here.
Good morning, Charlie. Matt Root.
Present.
Morning, Matt. And Pat Nelson. It looked like she walked away from her computer a minute ago.
She was here.
She's on, but she's not at her desk.
Yeah. She may have important things to handle, which I completely understand. So Pat's with us, just not verbally at the moment. And Don Guariello, co-chair. I'm here today. So good morning, everyone. First order of business is approval of the meeting minutes from just last week, July 29th, 2021. A couple of us noticed that there was a reference to Court's email, which I read on his behalf in his absence last week. Good morning, Pat. We called you present. I see that you're walking back to your desk. So that was not actually an attachment, Ian. I know you referenced it and said see attachment, but it was not actually attached. So if you could add that as an attachment on the official record, that would be great. Does anyone else have any edits or changes to those meeting minutes? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for approval of those with the addition of Court's email that was read.
So moved.
Thank you. Any seconds?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Jared, how do you vote? Thank you.
Yes.
Matt Johnson.
Yes. Aye.
I'm with you. It's a slow morning, Matt. We're all in this together. Lori Hunter.
Yes.
Thank you. Justin Cameron.
Yes.
John Harris.
Yes.
Russ Hughes.
Yes.
Is Peter with us yet? Nope. Okay, Court Booth.
Abstain. I was not present.
Thank you, Court. Heather Bout.
Yes.
Thank you, Heather. Frank Cannon.
Yes.
Chris Popoff.
Yes.
Charlie Parker.
Yes.
Matt Root.
Yes.
Pat Nelson. Pat, we're approving the meeting minutes.
Yes, yeah. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. Don Guariello, I'm a yes. All right, great. Moving on to correspondence. I'm going to put Heather on the spot, even though I haven't reached out to you. I know we received one email. I believe everyone got it from Mark Caruso.
Yep, that was sorry, my voice is not with me, but
Are you okay?
it's coming back. It's coming back. Yeah, I'll be fine. Thank you. I would do a lot of talking today, but yes, the email from Mark Russo was the one email to all of us, plus Charlie Parker's email that copied all of us. So that was it for the past week.
Okay, and Mark's email referenced the gym size and runoff, 6 feet versus 4 feet, preferred the 6 feet. I don't know if anyone has anything else under correspondence before we move on. Okay.
I think,
Go ahead, Pat.
well, I just want to I just want to note that Mark's email references the gymnasium, and I want to remind us that we've had extensive conversations about the gymnasium. I'm not trying to shut down discussion now. I'm sure it will come up later in the meeting, but we did go through this process. We've gone through an extensive process around the gymnasium, and I think we need to be careful about continuing to reopen issues. Not that we can't if we need to, but I think we just need to be mindful.
Thank you, Pat, for the reminder. And if anyone needs it, there was a memo issued on the exact size. I'm going off of memory here. 9568, I think, is the total square footage. That was from our July 15th meeting. So that was a memo that was shared with the greater committee.
I'd also add my voice that we should stick with the principles that we established, and that there is the option, if the runouts need to be wider, to narrow the courts.
Thank you for that. Great point.
Yeah, and I would add that we can also cut back on the amount of rows in the seating structure if they want more space there, because that shrinks the width of that when it's folded up.
Yeah, I think it goes 4 feet right now into the space. Again, I'm going off of memory, but when it's closed, 4 feet in its closed position.
Right.
So, okay. Well, unless anyone else has anything, I think we're status quo on that. And okay, great. So moving
Can
on
I
to.
just make a comment before
Oh,
you guys
sure.
move on? Sorry.
Wait, who is this?
Hi, I'm Amy DeVasion. I am the girls varsity basketball coach at CCHS.
Okay.
I just wanted to comment. I know you guys have put extensive amounts of time into this, but I just wanted to give a little bit of feedback. If you guys have 2 games going on the side courts, which is very possible with the middle school if the girls and boys are playing at the same time, that runoff on the sideline of 4 feet is going to be really tough when you're playing 2 games. If you have the kids, the benches are sitting on the sidelines, they're going to take up at least 3 feet with chairs and kids. And if you're playing 2 games at the same time, it's going to be really tough to inbound on the sideline with a 4-foot runoff. So I understand where Mark's coming from on this. To have a little bit more room on those sidelines is going to be critical, especially if kids trying to save the ball, going out of bounds. He's going to end up right on the lap of a player who's on the bench. So I think that's kind of the thought process there. For the main court, it's great. All the runoffs are fine, but on those 2 sideline courts, it's a little bit tough with the 4-foot cutoffs on the side. So I just wanted to comment on that. And hopefully you just take that into consideration. I know it doesn't seem like much to add, to go from 4 feet to 6 feet. But in terms of playing the games, I think it would be incredibly helpful for the kids who are playing. So I just wanted to put my 2 cents in and, thank you for considering.
What if the courts were 44 feet wide? Then this runoffs would be 6 feet.
I think though that then addresses the issue of, the main court being 44 feet wide is just not enough. I think you need to stick. I think that's the right size of the main court. What you guys agree.
Yeah, I'm
to
talking
70.
about the practice courts. The main court's all set.
Oh, are you talking about the 2 side courts?
Yeah, because that's where the runoffs, runouts would be affected, right? So if you narrow the courts, those practice courts by 2 feet, now you've got more runouts.
Dawn, I'm a little concerned we don't have this on the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I also just want to weigh in that Aaron Jonkis was part of this discussion. So maybe we need to talk on whether or not we're going to put it on an agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
Well,
Yeah, I
yeah,
don't want
I
to
mean-
take up more time. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we had a
Thank you. I
coach.
appreciate it.
Amy, we had a coach who participated in our last meeting and
Yeah.
basically said, yeah, what we're proposing is absolutely fine. So
Okay.
So I'm
So
going to
just
just back
note that.
up. I'm going to back up Lori's comment, and this is kind of sort of how we're going to keep these meetings focused. If we are going to reopen the discussion of the gym and possibly the discussion of the that will impact the budget discussion. We need to make that decision. That needs to go on the agenda. It needs to be made public. So I
Are
think
you
we probably
asking
should
them to
just.
make a decision about putting it on the agenda now?
No, I mean, I would rather not reopen this discussion.
Can we say that we have a set of dimensions, and CCYB and the school can do anything they want with those dimensions, but we have a set of dimensions. So you can shrink it and shrink those courts and get what you want, but we have dimensions.
Charlie, maybe procedurally it would make sense to hold that until new business, and we can, hear today's presentation, and then the committee can decide if they want to reopen this. And then we can
Great.
move on.
Let's push that to item 7 under new business, and we can either decide that we're going to stick at the 9568. I'll pull up that memo. I don't think I have it open anymore. Okay, we'll push that to new business. Great, thank you. So under regular business, we have review of the subcommittee membership. I think we had discussion at our last meeting just last week, so dust off those memories, but we talked about having the subcommittees reconvene to dive deeper into a few topics. And it made sense to review the membership in that, some of these haven't met in a while. So I think everyone received the link to when these were last reviewed as far as what membership is actively listed. And you'll see that almost a year ago, exactly, we were, this is from as far as who was on each subcommittee. So some of this is outdated, i.e. Tim Holt and Susan Bates in particular, and also Kate, I guess. So it's worth looking at. I think at this point, the management team remains the same, although actually we need to strike Tim Holt. So it's Lori Hunter, Tim Holt, Dawn Guariello, Pat Nelson, because Pat at the time was vice chair, just for the record. Tim and I were co-chairs, the OPM, and then the design firm. So I think it probably makes sense we strike Tim, and Pat and I remain as now co-chairs. We don't have a vice chair. Anyone want to volunteer? Kidding. So that remains the same unless anyone feels differently. Okay.
Some of
then
the question, Dawn, just sorry to interrupt. Some of the question here is, are these full committees when you start peeling off the people that aren't here anymore?
Yeah.
When you get to a couple of them, I think it's a very debatable question. So
right.
we may need some volunteers.
Committee of one. Yes. Yeah. So I guess we were going to, here's my thought, is if we kind of list out who is on what subcommittee and then look for volunteers, take off those who are not active members and then look for volunteers in areas where folks may need to, fill in some gaps. Does that make sense? So if we get through them all, so the design subcommittee, myself, Lori Hunter, Court Booth, Charlie Parker, Chris Popoff, and Matt Root are listed. Everyone should know that Matt chairs the sustainability subcommittee and sent a note to Court, who chairs the design subcommittee, requesting that he be removed from that subcommittee just so he could focus on the sustainability subcommittee, which makes sense. So there, Matt could come off of that design subcommittee. I guess we'd be looking to backfill his spot and see if anyone else were interested in joining that. Or I don't know.
This is Russ.
Hey, Russ.
I think I was on that committee.
When I saw that, I thought you were, and then I saw you under sustainability and thought, do I have him confused? So,
so we did the best we could. These may not be accurate. That's the other part that needs.
Yeah. So
by all means, let's get these cleared up. So
the committee did formally acknowledge Russ's addition to the subcommittee.
Thank you, Court. So Russ is added to that, not necessarily today, but he has been a part of that group, which makes a lot of sense. So thank you for clarifying, Russ. Okay, sustainability, Kate Hanley, who is no longer with us, Russ Hughes again, Frank Cannon, Matt Root, Tim Holt, who's not on the committee anymore, and Charlie Parker. So, and Matt is the chair of that group. So that I would suggest could use an additional member or two potentially in Kate and Tim's absence. Does anyone know, when Stephen's not here, are they filling her position? The town of Concord? Yes.
They're about to start interviewing.
Okay. That's great.
So I would expect that slot will get filled and replaced with Kate's successor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I would, there is potential to fill Tim's vacated spot on that particular group. Educational strategy, that's Lori, Justin, Heather. I think Heather was on there from the school committee standpoint. I guess I don't know the background.
Yeah.
And then other relevant school personnel selected by the superintendent. So that's like in the user meetings, I assume, Lori, or any major, like Aaron with the AD who walked the gym that day. Okay. And then finance, finance and communications. Here's where we start to fall apart. So finance had Tim at the helm, who's no longer with us, Susan Bates, who was at the time the select board representative, Jared Stanton, John Harris, and then Kate Hanley, who again is no longer with us. So we're down at this point to Jared and John. I would ask if Matt had any interest, just planting seeds, not necessarily procedurally.
Yeah, finance isn't my long suit, but I think that because the select board has a special interest in this topic, that I'll jump in.
I figured that might be the case, Matt. So, okay.
Thank
great,
you, Matt.
Dawn, I'd like to be considered for that.
Okay.
Not that I'm eager for more committee work, but I think that it's critical that we have as much citizen volunteer participation on these committees as possible. I think it's going to pay off in the long run, and this is a critical one. And again, not my strong suit either, but over the years, I've been forced to develop a little bit of capacity in this area.
And I don't know if this counts as being a member of the committee, but I would assume that as a co-chair, Dawn and I will participate or at least be present. I definitely will be present for the finance committee meetings and also the design and the sustainability. So
I think in the past, we've tried to have at least one of the co-chairs. Sometimes Lori filled that seat in the absence of myself and or you, Pat, or Tim at the time, just trying to have, someone representing kind of the leadership management group. So that we're kind of in the know and get updates on the happenings. So
yeah, I found it really helpful just to be able to hear the discussions. And so that what that means is that for the subcommittee, we're in the loop for when meetings are scheduled.
Your brother's already up and out. He's eaten.
sorry, I couldn't, did you ask a question, Pat? There was a lot
No,
of
I just
background.
said what that means for the subcommittee chairs is to just make sure the committee chairs are in the loop when you're scheduling meetings.
Yes. That'd be great. Thank you, Pat.
And I'm willing to volunteer for the design and the finance subcommittees if you need people.
Oh, hi, Peter. Okay, great. Great. So let me get through communication, then we can backtrack and see who's throwing their hat in the ring as far as membership and willingness to serve. So lastly, we have communication/community relations, and Pat's listed. I think when Pat became co-chair, she got promoted from vice chair, which I'm eternally grateful. We actually took her off of that because she felt as though the time that she could put into it might be less due to her co-chair position. So then we have Heather chairing, and then she had Kate working with her. And of course, Kate's no longer with us now. So at this point, Heather's holding down the fort. And as we know, Heather's school committee spot is being replaced with Alexa in the near future, and we're hopeful that the select board will help us try to keep Heather on our committee because she's so valuable. But for now, I think I'd like to, if you notice the revision on the agenda, we actually took off the vote for the chair on that. And I'd like to table that until after the select board meeting, if everyone's okay with that, to see where that, the direction on her membership, and also to fill Alexa to get her officially on the committee. So Alexa, I would encourage you to see anywhere in here that you might have a little bit of time to offer your membership if you're available to do so. We'll officially take that up as well as the communications subcommittee at our next meeting, if everyone's okay with that. All right, I don't hear any objections to that. So back to design, sustainability, and finance. Let's get that membership secure, and we'll work on communications and also allowing Alexa to get involved as she sees fit at our next meeting. So on design, we had Peter offer to put his.
Yeah, I've got him on finance, but I don't know if he was going to do both.
We do need to fill a spot if we're trying to somewhat maintain that in and about the numbers of folks, because we had Matt step down in order to focus on sustainability.
Okay.
And Alexa, feel free if you think you have thoughts on this and want to plant seeds, because we're willing to leave the space open or add you, as an additional member. So don't feel the need to stay silent. We're happy to hear your voice at the table, and then put you officially onto a subcommittee. And you can, of course, always attend. These are public meetings and have a voice. Okay. Anyone else on design? If not, I would look for, do I need to take a motion on this, or should we do one final one at the end?
Let's do one. Can we do one
at the end?
That's
Do one
more
at the end.
efficient.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So sounds like design is in a good place. We have most of our membership maintained, and looks like Peter will fill Matt's spot. Sustainability, we've lost Kate. Is there anyone who might be interested in joining that, or should we
Sorry, I
hold
gotta
that?
reflect that Kate's not there anymore.
Yeah, we can put a hold for her successor if we feel necessary. I just don't know if the timing on that's going to be helpful in the near future. I just don't know enough about that.
I think it'll be, I'd say a month-ish.
Okay. All right. So this next meeting or so may not be helpful, but we can certainly look to add that role, if we have a new membership with her successor. So at this point, it would be Matt, Russ, Frank, and Charlie.
Sorry.
You've got Frank there.
You have them twice. You don't have Russ's last name.
Sorry.
What's
That, why I've got, Russ Hughes. I only partially deleted. There we go.
Thank you for doing this, Matt, by the way.
And Matt, do we want to just make a note that we're holding a spot for the new town sustainability staff?
Sure.
I think, Russ, are you staying on the sustainability subcommittee? Are you able to?
Yeah, if you need me, I'd be glad to help.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you, Russ. Yeah, I think
Thanks,
we
Russ.
need the body.
Okay. I don't think there's any change. The educational strategy isn't really something that's like, in my mind, those are.
Does that even need to be a subcommittee at this
I
point?
don't, it's
I don't
not,
even know if we really
We've
made
got
it.
our educational
No.
plan.
yeah,
so-
yeah, it's not really, and that's, yeah, I was hoping we would skip right over that. Thank you. Okay, and then finance, Matt Johnson, Court and Peter both threw their hats in the ring on that.
Right.
I'm comfortable with all of you participating. So Matt, Jared, John, Court, Peter, we would need a chair. There's
One
not.
thing I did realize, they could decide the chair at a first meeting if we
Okay,
just got organized enough to call the meeting, and then the committee could decide the chair.
I'm fine with that.
Matt, for design, I've been chairing it. The way that worked was effectively way back when a Tim Holt, Dawn Gorello appointment that was ratified by the larger committee.
Okay.
Okay, so the finance subcommittee will determine a chair at their meeting. TBD. If that group can get together and decide on a time and place, just please include Pat, myself, and probably Lori on the communication so we can participate and or help get that set up. And then anything else on finance? I was going to move on to communications. Okay, I think that's in a great place. Thank you all. Communications. Heather, I'm going to assume for now that something positive will happen with your membership on our committee. And I know we talked about pushing this. So I guess I'd encourage anyone who might be interested in this. This is going to come at us very quickly in the next few months as far as getting the word out and sharing information for the greater community.
Yeah, I
So-
would say that the coming few months are going to be the biggest part of this, the biggest time frame for this committee. So I would, whether it's me chairing or somebody else, whoever it is, you're going to need more than one person. You're going to need a few people to kick in and organize this.
And just to be clear, we can have on this communication committee community members, as long as the chair is a member of the MSBC. Right, because you
For
guys
that, just
you're gonna
to
need help.
make sure everybody's okay with that. I had suggested that at a meeting, maybe, I don't know, a year or so ago.
I know.
And everybody, and it was shot down. So
I think at that same meeting, Heather, I tried to advocate the idea that at some point, all of us would be responsible for some community relations, even if we're not on this subcommittee. And I don't think we ever formally accepted that mantle, that responsibility, but I think it's kind of de facto part of being a member of this larger committee is that we are going to have to carry messages to our various constituent networks. You know, one of the reasons we're all on this committee is that we have various constituent networks, and we've got to be able to use them. So I would again make a plug for communications being everybody's business.
yes, and I know
totally-
on some of the past communications things, I have asked everybody to spread the word to their own constituencies. But it takes more than just that. There's a lot more than just kind of
yeah.
spreading the word and forwarding emails.
No question about it. Yeah, I'm not saying that replaces the subcommittee and
Right.
the work, because the communications have to originate and be coordinated somewhere, to your point.
Right, exactly.
So I would just like to put a plug in for, and we can decide this next week, that we have a chair and a co-chair who are members of the building committee. I think that's really important, but that committee can recruit and have other workers for that committee, because there is a lot of behind the scenes work that has to take place.
That's
I don't know if this sounds like a
just a-
crazy idea, but also I'd note that the town manager does not belong to any of the subcommittees, and maybe that's appropriate, but If there's one that I think would make sense, I mean, clearly he's sort of a member of all of them, but that communications, and especially the ability to muster resources to deliver communications within the town is just a consideration. Again, I doubt, I'm assuming Heather would need to coordinate with the town manager's office anyway, but it's just a thought. As I look down all of our members and see who's assigned to subcommittees, that's the only member who is not currently on a subcommittee.
And Dawn, you asked me to speak up as appropriate if I am confirmed or whatever, nominated, sworn in, oath, whatever. I think this is probably an appropriate place where I could step in.
Excellent.
Thank you, Alexa.
Thank you so much. All right. So sounds like we will make those official as far as the communications subcommittee at the next meeting in the wake of the select board meeting. So that's excellent. Thank you, Alexa, for that. And Heather for holding tight until we know more.
All good.
All right. So with that, I would entertain a motion to I guess we officially vote on this, right? Is it confirm or
I think we can appoint the members of the subcommittee as listed on the working document reviewed at today's meeting.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. Was that a motion?
That's a motion. I moved that.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the help and the motion, Matt. Okay, we have a motion. Any seconds?
Second.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for a vote. Jared Stanton.
Yes.
Thank you. Matt Johnson.
Aye.
Lori Hunter.
Yes.
Justin Cameron.
Yes.
John Harris.
Yes.
Russ Hughes.
Yes.
Peter Fashalis.
Yes.
Court Booth.
Yes.
Heather Bout.
Yes.
Frank Cannon.
Yes.
Chris Popoff.
Yes.
Charlie Parker.
Yes.
Matt Root.
Yes.
Pat Nelson.
Yes.
And I am a yes. All right. Excellent. Next is, so that's the first bullet under for business. The next is to review the subcommittee topics. I think what the greater committee agreed to is that the subcommittees would dive deep as determined by the greater committee into topics that seem relevant for them to dive deeper into in the absence of the time of the greater committee to do so. So
And Dawn,
with that, was someone going to say something?
yeah, I think it's worth repeating that also the committees don't have any independent or unilateral authority. They bring recommendations to the larger committee where any and all actual decision-making occurs, if I'm correct.
That's correct. Thank you, Court, for that. So I guess I would, Pat reached out to the chairs yesterday, asking if they had topics that they had heard of from their current subcommittee members, as far as, details they thought needed to be dug deeper into, or information that they felt necessary in order to help the greater committee decide on, major design decisions. I guess I'd open this to the two chairs, three if Heather has anything, design and sustainability, to either raise those topics that have been brought to their attention, and or for any committee members to suggest topics that they believe need to be reviewed at the subcommittee level. So Court, I don't think you had an agenda per se. I don't know if you had topics that you had heard from subcommittee members so far as items that they still had questions on.
Yeah, I can make this pretty brief. Right
Sure,
now, we are looking at a meeting for August 19th, again, with the purpose of trying to dive a little deeper into design considerations that are being worked on with our design team. Later today, Kristen and I check in, whereupon I'll then issue a draft agenda for everybody's comments. But right now, we are talking about for agenda purposes, the idea that we've got some fiscal parameters that always need a recheck, that we have a space summary that we want to make certain is something that's been reaffirmed, not with the intent of reopening it, that we want to be certain that there's clarity about understandings around gym, auditorium, and cafeteria specifically from a design perspective, again, not intending to reopen it per se, that we want to, and I'll quote here, review the process for examining the decision-making about the form of the building, such as footprint, details, indents, corners, rooftop complexity, and so on. To the extent it doesn't fall into sustainability, windows, ratio, daylighting requirements, relationship to the different classroom orientations, some members think worthy of agenda. A flow, the anticipated traffic flow with an eye toward potential bottlenecks or potential underutilized areas and what that means for us. And then we hope sometime devoted to where design objectives interact with sustainability objectives, to the extent that's a design discussion. So those are the ones that are in play right now. Again, work on this later today, Dawn.
Thank you, Court. My only question on that list, I'm mostly on board with that, has to do with the cafeteria. What was the question around that?
None,
Okay.
really basically just reaffirming and making certain that the educators know that it's received the diligence that it needs and is going to stand up to their anticipated uses. That's all. Just because it's one of the student and community facing pieces of the building that is not small in size and is off MSBA guidelines. So we just want to make sure that the entire committee is on the same page, understanding our plans.
Okay. Anyone have any feedback on this or anything they think should be added or not?
Clark, can you say a little bit more about what you mean by review process, about the shape of the building decisions or process of decision making?
Yeah, I think it is wise for the design subcommittee and this entire committee here to understand how the decisions will ultimately come forth in regard to things as major as a footprint of the building, because we've had various discussions about some of the indents in the building and the complexity of the building. And before that gets closed out, we want to look at why and how those decisions either were made or are on the table for this committee to look at.
So this would be an opportunity for a group to hear some more about the rationale for the designs that were being presented at the main committee.
That's correct. Yeah, insofar as it's a design discussion, yes.
All right. Okay.
But
Any other
again,
questions?
I note that these are draft items that are going to be worked on later today, with then a document in the form of a draft agenda that goes out to the subcommittee for final comment before we lock down on an agenda for August 19 and estimate the time that we're going to need to get into these items and then bring them back to the larger committee insofar as we can add to our collective understanding and lead toward any future decisions that come before this committee.
Court, I have a question.
Please.
You commented, for example, on the cafeteria. Could you just walk us through a little bit what you're talking about there? I mean, are we going to look at the relationship between servery and number of servings, and what are we going to do? Are we going to look at the chair closet? Are we going to help me out with the purpose
Sure.
of this review?
Sure. Well, let me try to answer this by giving you the broader parameters that I've shared with Kristen Olson, and that is that the committee might do well to work with her and her team as necessary to look at any decisions that are yet to be made in regard to design relative to different areas of the building, cafeteria included. And she may tell us that's all closed out. There's nothing in play at all. Here's what it is. And this committee has implicitly assumed that through the space summary acceptance that there is nothing yet, nothing further to discuss. But if there are debates that she's having internally at the design team level, it would be well to bring them before the design subcommittee as well.
I think I'd like to take this moment just to say I'm hopeful that the space summary is really, really close to where we end up, and that, I think our motion, God, I don't even remember when this happened, but we accepted it with the parameters of the gymnasium, discussion, which landed us at 9568, and then look for efficiencies, which I think Lori has done a great job sort of bringing some reduction of spaces in front of us, moving toward, that for the sake of efficiency. So I don't know that we, I think at some point we need to let the designers design the building with a space summary that is in and about where we want to be. And, I know enough about schematic design to know that you push and pull walls and you try and keep within those parameters as best you can as far as net square footage. But I hope we can get really close to closing that piece of it out and look for other ways to be efficient with the building.
I must have missed something, because I thought that we had said that during schematic design, there would be an opportunity to do fine tuning on things we might have missed with respect to the space question, that it wasn't final, and that it would be subject to tuning in areas where there was an opportunity to do that because perhaps something had been missed or skipped over. And the chair closet is a good example of that. But yeah.
Well, Charlie, I think I can pick up on what both you and Dawn have said. One of my hopes or objectives, if you will, is to reduce the chances that this committee is going to want to revisit things at times that are very unhelpful to the process. Some of our decisions are implied and tacit decisions, and that's fine so long as we don't have to crack it open later because certain parties think that it was either misunderstood or not communicated or not debated. I think we get to put some closure on these. I think I'm of a mind that conforms nicely to what you and Dawn are saying.
Well, let's just say that I thought that, I still think that we're trying to get the space to conform to the $100 million objective. We may not get there, but that's the objective at the end of the day, I think, or one of them. That, we want to look for areas where we can fine tune. And I know Lori continues to work on this in terms of her looking at other spaces, including the teacher workroom and some of the science stuff. So we can't dictate anything, but I think the bottom line is we're all in this together and we need to rally around that goal, and we should try to get there because that's what we said we were going to do. So I think the design subcommittee ought to weigh in on that and ought to be a lead on that.
Charlie, I think that I think that this is a discussion that can take place in the design subcommittee. I'm in agreement with Court and with Dawn and with everyone. I'm excited about the design subcommittee or the sustainability subcommittee or anybody coming together and kind of mulling over things that we've heard in this primary committee that people still have questions about. They'll either through their sort of more intimate conversations with SMMA or the architects or the design team, get clarification on questions or achieve a higher comfort level with decisions that have been made, or they'll raise questions. But I think that can happen within these design subcommittees now that we actually have schematics that we're working on. So,
Well, I'm happy about that. That's good.
yeah, so I think that I'm not sure that we need further discussion on how that subcommittee is going to operate, but I think Court's got a good handle on it as the chair.
Great, thank you.
And finally, I'd say this entire committee will quickly be able to judge whether our efforts have offered any value to the larger committee. Proof's in the pudding. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
But I do want to be sure that nobody else on the committee has something that's sort of niggling in their minds that they want to share with Court. That, as Court said, we don't want to have these things come up after the fact. So just going to give everyone another opportunity to give Court anything else that they think we should be looking at.
Are we talking about, when you say nibbling, one of the things I wanted to make sure we talked about was Mark Caruso's correspondence on the gymnasium. Is this the time to do that?
Well, we decided we put that under new business because we did come to a conclusion in this main committee about the size of the gym. So
okay.
A discussion in new business.
Okay.
Great. Matt, I want to give you an opportunity to run through anything you might have received from your subcommittee members as far as content to let the greater committee weigh in if there's anything that they feel should be added or changed, if you are willing to be put on the spot.
Thank you, Don. Yep. Yeah, so I mean, I think the sustainability subcommittee will try and meet twice between the next larger committee meeting on the 27th so that we can provide recommendations to the larger committee. We don't have a date set up, but I will work to get those two meetings set up shortly. The 6 items that I've received to date, and again, anyone should feel free, whether you're on the subcommittee or not, feel free to send me new items, but 2 with regards to ventilation, 1 on natural ventilation, 1 on displacement ventilation, reviewing the EV charging station requirements based on the Easy Code adoption, the EUI target based on the initial SMMA energy model, the eco design charrette that SMMA will be holding at some point in the future, and the PV, which is getting system which will be done through CMLP, but a consultant has been retained and discussions have started with SMMA. So just getting an update on that work. And any other ideas are welcome.
Does anyone have anything to add to Matt's list or to edit in any way?
I had one that might be worth putting on just because I asked it offline on the difference, and maybe it's covered under the way you just named it, difference between air conditioning versus dehumidification, and why we need to go one way versus the other in order to meet our goals here. So I think we're going to get asked about that potentially. Okay. So
great, thanks, Laurie. I will add that.
Matt, I was at a recent meeting where the notion of this Envision sustainable infrastructure rating system was brought up. And I know that we have talked about meeting LEED standards, but then not getting the certification because of, the difficulty there. But this envision framework does seem interesting from two perspectives. One is that it takes a more holistic approach, not just the building, but the site. And then the second is that I believe that, you know, the kind of certification and all, it's self-certification, I believe, so that it doesn't have the same sorts of issues there, and that there are a lot of professionals in the business that have been trained in the framework. So it just struck me as an opportunity. Again, it doesn't have the brand equity that LEED does, but it may be a useful tool for evaluating our sustainability initiatives, because it does seem to me so far that we've been doing them sort of individually, and this would provide a kind of a system approach.
Great. Thank you, Matt.
Great. Anyone else? All right, sounds like those subcommittees have their marching orders. I will offer anything on communication if anyone has
Well,
anything.
one comment on finance before we jump.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So I would just suggest that I would look to Jared as, first of all, a candidate for chair of the subcommittee, but then also perhaps to help organize us and call such a meeting.
Okay.
If I can just say too, just to let you all know, we will be following sort of the MSBA financials, using the same codes, the same structure. When we interviewed Hill, they presented us with sort of how they have their financial packets and everything. And I'm comfortable with the way that I feel that we're going to handle the finances in an easy, transparent, easy to explain way. So I welcome that, but we can certainly discuss when we meet.
Are you willing to spearhead
Take that
that
action
meeting?
item?
I certainly will.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. And I think we had a actual line item to vote for the chair at this meeting. I think there was a suggestion that the subcommittee could sort that out at the first meeting if folks are comfortable with that. Do I need a physical motion? Does anyone know to let the finance subcommittee do that at their first meeting, since it was listed as a
No,
vote?
I don't think so, personally.
Okay, I'm comfortable having that subcommittee. You know, Jared's name's
On the
been
other hand, I
mentioned.
don't see anybody else raising their hands, so
Actually, I see them cowering under the
they can
desk.
step
So
back.
don't look at me. No, I'm kidding. But
My
I think Jared's a
11
great
liaison
candidate.
assignments.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, great. So please let us know when that meeting will happen, and I'm sure it will be posted. And I look forward to hearing if Jared ends up taking the reins on that. I think he's a great candidate for that. So excellent. So does that close us out of that agenda item? I think it might, unless there was anything for communications, but I think we'll hold on that. Great. So let's move on to schematic design, number 5. If the design team is ready.
Great, thank you. So our partners with Ewing Cole are going to have most of the presentation content today on architecture. Mike Dowhan is with us again, should there be any conversation about folding in some of the site discussion from last meeting or integration of the building architecture in the site. So he's here as well. And then before I have the Ewing Cole team get started, the cost due diligence slides haven't changed from last week. We expect that there will be some more topics added or some more items added maybe by August 27th, but we're not going to go through those. There have been no changes, but they're retained for record. And then the only other item is timekeeping wise, we're anticipating the presentation and discussion to go up until 9:15, reserving about 15 minutes for public comment, new business, and closing, if that sounds all right.
Sounds great.
If you want to share your screen. Saul, you're muted at the moment.
Bill, go ahead. Bill.
Yeah. So this is the site plan. It's as presented before. Not too much has changed since Mike's meeting, so the landscape meeting last week. So I think we can skip past this. As far as the floor plan advancements go, there have been, we continue to advance and integrate systems, some mechanical, electrical, plumbing, as well as structural coordination. The largest change on this plan that you'll see is on the left, working with our kitchen consultant to develop a plan for the servery and the seating, and as well as rehearsing the trash and delivery schedules. We will be meeting with Concord Public Schools to have a preview of this, I believe today. On the right side, we're working with the educational staff. Not too much to report back there, but we continue to engage in conversations on how the team comms is used, how the classrooms are used, and how space is allocated there. You can go ahead. On the second floor, there's been a seemingly insignificant but fairly significant change on the left side of the plan. You can see that there was an L-shaped arrangement of the world language classrooms. Those are now oriented true north or east-west for optimal solar orientation. And that does a couple things for us. And that's essentially, it reduces the building envelope, which means the amount of wall area. So that should realize some savings in cost, as well as improve the energy modeling. And then also provide a better kind of interior environment for spill out of the world language classrooms or the art room onto the kind of central space in between there in the corridor. The lower level tracks with the floors above, and there's not too much to report back here. And you can see the building massing. This is very similar to what was presented before. So you can see the kind of gym auditorium on the right side, as well as the hint of the parking layout, and then how the building unfolds down the landscape with the classroom, with the lobby connecting them. And then this is from the south. You can see that the kind of corrected classrooms on the left, which interact with the bridge, and then the opportunity for the media center and the cafeteria to get good daylight out.
Thank you, Bill. Before we, the process of designing the building envelope and the building in general is sort of usually a more open-ended in the early stages, but because of our very tight envelope and our very sort of tight plan, we are delving into details early on to make sure that what we show later on is in the budget and performs to all these models. So it's a bit of I would say, a grueling process, and I hope you enjoyed to a certain extent, and I hope you kind of stick with us through the process. And just to review where we are, and goals are really, really important. I mean, I think that different people in the group have different goals and different vision or different emphasis. And I think that we all have to think about all the issues that the building envelope sort of generates. First goal that we're trying to kind of meet, and a very important one, is to meet the budget parameters by minimizing the surface area of the building in general. And Bill already talked about that situation, and adhering to a ratio of 75% masonry and 25% glass. So that begins to kind of set the parameters for what we're showing and the exploration within that. We are also kind of sticking to the 25% glazing ratio in the building in order to meet the energy performance of the building. But we are building a middle school, and it is very important for us to think about the experience of students and the teachers and the community within the building. And
that's not just a classroom, but it's also about the general building, right? It's about sort of punctuations of light, punctuations of space, and a series of other events that contribute to this being a place of joy. And we're going to the fourth item here, and that was one of the missions of the school early on. The next item is the exterior building, the equivalent of that in the exterior building. I mean, right now we have a sort of a very simple, very clear building diagram, but also because of the masonry issue and because of the 25% envelope, we also want to work very hard on creating a building that in its scale is not monumental, it's welcoming, and a building that the community can be proud of, right? Finally, the last couple of points are also very critical. I mean, we often talk about sustainability, but landscape is a critical item of sustainability, and we want the building envelope and the building exterior to kind of integrate with that. And finally, begin to, in a sort of indirect way, reference the traditions of Concord, and that was brought up. So with that, let's talk about the first set of issues. Sorry. The building envelope. We're actually very excited about sort of the configuration of the building skin. What you're seeing here is the diagram of the building envelope with the different ratios of glazing. The building, much of the building actually is opaque with very little glazing, and that's represented in blue. And the green is so the green and the yellow are middle level. The yellow is around 25 to 30 to 28%, and those sort of stretches represent the classrooms, which is really important. And while the average building is kind of right now running around 25, we did increase the amount of glazing at the classrooms by also by reducing the glazing or eliminating glazing in what we call the opaque areas, which are blue. What's beautiful about this diagram is actually that if you look at the north arrow, that the north and the south have the vast majority of the glazing. And what you're seeing here on the east and west orientations, which are the most difficult solar orientations, you have all opaque walls, mostly opaque walls. Which are represented by the blue. You can see it here, 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 and here. The upper zones of the building on the upper levels are also opaque, with the exception of some of daylight that's coming into the gym. So on a solar sort of orientation diagram and program diagram, this has been very successful in terms of achieving the sort of sustainability and cost budgets. The glazing, the more extensive glazing areas happen in very important locations that allow to kind of create that, what I would call punctuation. They happen in the lobby. They happen in the middle of the classroom block, and it happens also in the end of the classroom blocks. And these are, at the cafeteria, these are really important places where students that are usually, let's say, moving or circulating in the building gets to see these punctuations of light, right? We're very economical in ways with this building, but we believe that these areas are very important, and number of issues keep coming up about some of these in and outs, but without these in and outs, this building will become monolithic, and from an experienced student point of view, more difficult.
Sol,
Sure,
do you want questions at the end?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to stop.
Okay.
I was going to stop here and sort of see if anybody has any questions.
I actually do. If you go back one
Sure.
slide, please.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
On the gym,
It
looks like you've got west facing on the upper.
Don, I knew you were going to bring that up.
Why not put it on the north?
A couple of things. This elevation is actually a relatively public elevation, and we wanted to use a glazing, and we have solar protection, you'll see in a second, as a way of giving this more of a presence and a level of interest. And we're using the glazing, a projection of the roof overhang, and the vertical fins that will help with the solar projection as a way of bringing interest and scale to that elevation. So from the road, a very visible elevation will not look like a sort of an overwhelming mass. But if we could use it on the north facade, but we probably couldn't use it on both sides. But if the committee decides that we want to look at the north facade only, we can do that.
Just so everyone understands why I'm asking, if you imagine the competition court and a kid doing a layup from the middle of the court heading west in mid-afternoon, say on a, November day, depending on, and I haven't seen the solar shading to know, but there could be direct daylight coming in on that court, which would prevent a student athlete from, seeing where the hoop is, as an example. Sure. If you do it on the north, I understand it's less interesting from a elevation standpoint. And if Saul, you want to point out that north elevation, it's kind of the high side of the gym. Yeah, it's actually right there. Perfect. There would be no solar mitigation required at all. You'd never have direct sun, and you could actually do clear glazing and actually be able to see the blue sky and puffy clouds on a beautiful day. But you'll never have that direct sunlight on a student athlete, whether it's the main competition court nor the cross courts. So just food for thought. I appreciate what you're saying from a visibility standpoint from the road. There may be other ways to make that elevation interesting. Logistically, I always look at how one uses this space, because that will become important. So the last thing we want to end up putting are blinds of any sort in there that someone has to manage and control, because there's direct sunlight on the students when they're trying to play.
Correct.
So just something to think about. I've said
no, absolutely. And you'll see in the elevation, we have both vertical shades and horizontal shades to avoid any direct sunlight. And not only these elements begin to kind of address the glare that you're talking about, but they also begin to kind of create sort of a top building that brings interest. But I mean, we can look at the movement of the daylight into the north as well.
Okay, I'm willing to wait that out. I just wanted to plant that seed.
No, I mean, I knew, we all knew that you're going to bring it up, and Keith actually brought it up. Everybody brought it up. But then when we'll show you the elevation, it's kind of a negotiation between the functionality of the building without ever compromising it, and we would never compromise the fun of the gym. But it's also a negotiation of the functionality of the building in relationship to the building exterior. And while for some people, the exterior is not that important, it does become important for the community and other things. So it's kind of a back and forth process that we want to share with you.
Fair enough. I'm willing to hear you out on it. So please.
All right. Well, absolutely. And we're more than happy to, if the committee wants to kind of move in a different direction, we'll accommodate that. So back to the idea, we have a masonry building.
So you've got a few questions.
We.
I'm sorry about that. Please
yeah, hands up.
Yeah, so if you go back to that fenestration, so I guess the first thing I would say is that as long as the home end of the court is on the interior of the building, it's an advantage, right? Have that bright sun come in against the competition. But no, I just want to add my voice to, I think that the building, design should focus on functional elements and a lot less. This site is just not that sensitive around, the external appearance, monumentality, all those issues. I just don't think that this site is that sensitive. And so I really would like to optimize as much as possible the functional capabilities. But let me get back to my original question, which is around the media center area doesn't seem to have much. Okay, that's there. What is this a little further in beyond the cafeteria, going to the left?
This guy?
No, keep going down and towards the gym on the bottom. Yeah, what is that area? No, a little
Those
bit
are
to
the
the right of
service-
there, right of there.
It's mechanical and custodial spaces.
No, but to the
The
right.
kitchen, the kitchen.
That's the kitchen.
That's
Matt.
the kitchen. Okay.
And
got it.
servery.
So the only other area that I was looking at is toward in the entrance up in the middle top. Again, I'm sorry, I can't point right. Yeah, to the right of the entrance to the there. What is that?
That's a stair and an elevator.
And so why would the front of the stair and the elevator area need 30 to 80% glazing?
The stair, well, the elevator doesn't, but we have been encouraging people to use stairs. That's a northern orientation. The stair has become, that stair is the primary circulation for the school. And it's part of essentially creating a place of well-being, daylight. And it's been sort of very common to use the primary stair as a way of bringing daylight to the experience of the student. But not only that, the stair is actually open on with place with holders for the to the main lobby. So the idea here is that the stair, which is one of the first experiences of the students and one of the primary circulation experiences of the students, have a lot of daylight.
And even in front of the elevator wall there?
That's actually, you'll see it in the rendering, that's solid.
That's solid. So that's not actually
yeah,
red.
that's
It should be
no, yeah, I mean, sorry, yeah,
blue.
that's yeah.
Because I guess the other thing I see with some of your other studies later is that a lot of the classroom spaces seem to have more window than what we're planning here. And I just worry, that we may get a feel that's a lot more enclosed for those classrooms. And I realize we do have competing interests, but I was looking for opportunities where in some of these common spaces, we're having, huge walls of window that may be taking away from the available window space for the learning spaces. So that's all. That was my.
And we have, no, and that's a valid point, and we wanted to bring that up part of the discussion. Those punctuation, a lot of light are very important for the sort of general sort of sensibility of the place. But we can always reduce those and add a couple of percentage point of glazing to the classroom. And that's kind of a back and forth process we have to negotiate.
Yeah, I would
And,
just,
I
the principle, that would be my bias.
Yeah. So any other questions?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Can you help me understand for the gymnasium, the windows? It seems to me that, a functional gymnasium oftentimes won't have any windows. And that I'm wondering, what the purpose is. Obviously, letting in daylight is nice, but I remember the lower gym had windows at one point, I think, at the high school before we tore it down, and they all got broken. And so I'm just, if you can help me understand that, and maybe there's a way to save some money there. It doesn't seem to be an ideal place to put windows.
The daylight issue is a really important issue. All the sort of information, the professional information recommends that in all spaces that are occupied for over a certain amount of time, that you have daylight. In fact, in Europe, the standard now is that every space that is occupied for more than half an hour during the day would have daylight. And that has significant effect on the sort of the perception, the psychology, and the sort of the experience of people within the building. So understanding that really conceptually none of the spaces need daylight, we have tried to bring daylight to the key events within the building, the programmatic. And one of them is the gym. If you look at some of the images that other schools have sort of done in some of the gyms, the windows really create a huge difference in the spatial sort of, and the experience of the people within that. So that's essentially, that's sort of our thinking. It's sort of like the stair, right? why would you really need daylight within a stair? But it's an important part of the student's day. And we try to bring daylight to all those places. And I suppose it's something that happens. And then that's why we're also doing it in a clear story, so you don't wind up with a breakage. We usually don't put it in the lower areas of the gym because of that issue, but in the upper levels, in the clear story, that usually is less problematic.
And at this point, I might, in the interest of time, say that we can come back to more window discussion, but I do believe it was on this seems like it's a good testament to Court's offering of having this on the design subcommittee topic list. So I hope this kind of gave an overview, and we should probably step through the other slides, dive into it in more detail in design subcommittee, and come back on the 27th with more information. But that being said, we definitely want the broader committee's input. That's the whole goal, our goal, certainly. So do send emails to us as we prep for those meetings.
So just quickly, the images that we've shared last time with you in terms of the idea of articulating the brick within the brick of the building, and people sort of favored the softer feel of the materials of the brick as a way to soften the sort of sensibility of the building. And it's not just about the perception of the building by the community, and I understand that the site is not that important, but it's also creating a building that students feel comfortable entering. And because we don't have multiple materials, I think the articulation of the brick becomes important. So we've studied all of, we're about to show you first through the classrooms. And one of the important things in the classroom is the distribution of light. And what is very common right now is to limit, in terms of the energy performance, is to limit the amount of glazing within the lower zones of the classroom, but to create a clear story, allowing daylight to come in deeper into the building. So the first one, the first scheme actually has the most glazing, but in many ways it performs less than the other schemes, is the sort of simple punched windows in the middle of the building, in the middle of the classroom. But as you can see, the distribution of light gets to be a little bit more problematic in relationship to the larger area. The SDA, which is the sort of a measure for distribution of daylight within the larger classroom, is at 35%. And in this scheme, in this option, has 102 square feet of daylight, of windows in the room. The effect of it is on the larger building. You can see here the larger elevation. And then this begins to speak to sort of how to begin to articulate the building envelope. Again, all in the sort of cost parameters. You can see here the front of the building at the public spaces is a lower set of spaces with the auditorium and the gymnasium further back. This is the classroom space volume. And that window study begins to kind of reflect on the exterior with this sort of pattern reading. Sort of the public spaces have a sort of a base approach, where we have a base of the building that sort of seats the larger sort of areas of gradient. And that's the brick pattern that we kind of showed in the previous images. The back of the building begins to get a light shelf, not the back, the sort of the wood side of the building begins to get a light shelf and a horizontal sunshades, possibly with vertical sunshades. We're exploring that. And these just are some of the views. Don't forget that the building, the lower level of the building, is slightly recessed into the ground. There's a considerable gap between it, so you're kind of, it's hard to perceive. And this is the front of the building of the public spaces. The next study begins to introduce a clear story and two windows. And you can see here, we're trying to kind of stretch the window glazing along the facade of the building, the facade of the classroom in order to kind of create a distribution of daylight. That begins to generate a particular pattern.
Pretty hard to see.
And again, in the south side of the building, we have sunshade. We'll be studying sunshades. And again, the view of the building, facade. The third study, we're beginning to sort of approach some of the idea of distributing the larger openings on the left side and the right side, and creating a clear story in the middle of the building with, because that begins to give us an opportunity to introduce a sort of a teaching wall or sort of part of the teaching component of the classroom. Even though the teaching walls are on the left and the partition walls on the right, but this begins to give us an opportunity to use the space. And even though this is actually a lower number of square feet of glazing, it has a better distribution of daylight, or similar distribution of daylight in the classroom. It's at 35% of the SDA. And this is where some of the opportunities of increasing the amount of glazing begins to kind of take place. This sort of approach begins to generate, again, its own sort of particular pattern of the windows. This is a slightly different approach to the sort of the public spaces of the building. Instead of creating a base, we're beginning to use the sort of what I would say diffusion pattern of the brick, or the ombre kind of pattern of the brick, as a sort of an element that runs through with a central piece that begins to kind of capture that and create a center configuration. And again, the pattern on the southern side. Finally, we looked at the last version, and one of the nice things is to actually begin to create a place where people can see down. We lowered one of the windows, and we repositioned the configuration of the windows again, got them a little bit tighter to each other, and increased it by just 1 square foot. And the SDA actually became a little bit better. It's at 36. And what's interesting about this is that we can actually, if we added the extra 6 feet that the first scheme had to this one configuration, would have a superior number here. We just haven't had a chance to do it. We will do it for the next time. And what's interesting about this, that this configuration also begins to generate a slightly more playful pattern of windows. And I know it's less important for some other people, but it becomes more important when you look at the building elevation in general for children and for the community. And this elevation, this is what we just looked at, begins to kind of generate a slightly more interesting sort of playful pattern in relatively what I would call a solid building. The pattern within the music classrooms here, it recalls the sort of clear story and punched window again. And this is the southern elevation. Again, we would use a light shelf and a sunshade. We're showing these colors right now in a slate blue gray brick. but we're also doing a series of explorations with other colors. One of them is red. We do think that one issue, we do think that, and we're not there yet, but the having a sort of a more muted color for the building with accent wood look. They're not wood, but they're kind of terracotta brown or wood grain materials begins to be kind of more sort of sophisticated and slightly less in your face, and begins to kind of diminish the brickiness of the building itself. This is a comparison slide for the daylighting, and you know, we would recommend, and I know this is, we would recommend moving in the direction of this configuration with a slight increase of glazing that we would borrow from other places, in order to sort of create more daylight and better distribution of daylight. But I mean, again, it's open-ended question for the committee. The windows generate a pattern on the building exterior, and the larger sort of reading of the elevations. So again, I'd like to open it for conversation.
I believe we have Matt first, Matt Johnson.
Sure. So hey, there's no accounting for taste, I guess, but for me, you know, you called that alternation of windows in the exterior playful. It feels bewildering to me. I would really prefer to see the middle row of windows aligned rather than mirroring the levels 1 and 3. It just very difficult to read that facade. It gets very almost messy in my mind. Especially when you add, you know, the move the windows down a little bit relative to one another, and then add the exterior elements there for shading, it really becomes complex to the point of confusion in my mind. Again, that's just me. I'm not an architect, but and then the second thing is about the coloring, and I just think that the gray coloring, you know, as you imagine stone or something, it just doesn't reflect any kind of local slate or volcanic kind of, you know, soil. We just don't really have that color in our palette as we try to sort of get a naturalistic look and feel. So I guess I'm not very, you know, encouraging of that color palette, but that's, again, it's all just taste. You know, it's not the most critical parts of the project, but it just emotionally hit me, both of those things.
And then Charlie?
Yes, yeah, I had a couple of comments. I guess that last time I brought up the point that it would be good, or maybe in my written comments, I brought up the point that it would be good to understand the goals for the window placement before we actually get into the nitty-gritty of the window placement. I think functionally we're trying to serve a specific purpose, and that purpose is daylighting. We want the building to look good, but I guess, you know, it would be good to clarify what our goals are for SDA, for your spatial, you know, daylight autonomy,
Sure.
and you know, whatever those goals are. And I don't think we need to discuss whether they're right or wrong, but I think it would be good to understand what the goals are and why those goals are the goals.
Sure. Well, so we have 3 goals here, right? We want to distribute light as much as possible within the budget of the building, both in terms of cost and in terms of performance, right? So that's why we are using a clear story in a lot of the schemes, because given the amount of glazing that we can probably comfortably use here, we can't create as much opening as we would like. And you begin to see it here, right? So that's why we're introducing these clear stories, because it allows you to bring as much daylight as possible into the inside of the building, into the sort of interior of the classroom, right? The second goal is, actually the goal is not about the exterior, but it is in the back of our mind, because again, we don't want this building to perform and looks like a 1960s, I would say, you know, industrial building, right? Because so there's that issue, and I know it's all about taste, and we will work with you to the point of comfort. So when we're distributing the glazing here, we're trying to get as much of the glazing spread throughout the classroom in order to allow daylight in. That's the goal, right? So that's why we started. We didn't even look at the exterior until the last stage. That's why we started with these interior studies, in order to understand what configuration within the 25 to 28, maybe tops 30% of that surface area would give you the best daylight.
So I'm okay with all, I'm okay with all of that, and certainly nobody wants an industrial building. I guess my question is just a little bit more basic. It's, what are we trying to do with daylighting, and how does it, you know, and where do those goals come from? Do they come from LEED? Do they come from WELL? Do they come from some sort of standards for schools in general? What are the numbers that we're trying to achieve here?
So LEED recommends that the SDA is in a continually inhabited space is approximately 50 to 55%, right? That number is going to be very difficult to achieve given the amount of glazing and the performance. I mean, LEED within it has certain contradictions. I think that the first point you can get LEED in terms of daylighting, it's around 40-something%. And we can probably get close to that by adding a few square feet to the lower configurations. But it's also about the sort of the quality of experience of the room itself. Some of it is not quantifiable. Some of it is just about looking at the room and saying, there's enough daylight for a child and there are enough open windows to look out, right? I mean, it's not all about performative issues, but it's a combination of the performative issues and sort of the experiential issues. We would like to get to a 40% SDA to get a sort of a level of comfort here. And that's why we recommend, probably if there's a preferred sort of direction, add a few more square feet. However, adding more square feet to a strategically difficult situation like number one is not going to help us that much, because we need to get more. Sure.
Just to frame the discussion then for the design subcommittee, so we all know what one of the factors that we want to explore here is why not, for example, 55%. So that again, that's for the design subcommittee, but I think everybody should understand that these numbers, you know, again, are there for a reason. LEED has them for a reason. WELL has them for a reason. And we should understand what those reasons are. And if we're going to be less than that, what the impact is. So that's all I have to say about that. And I want the most creative placement of the windows and the least industrial building possible. But I really want, and I think Matt kind of said the same thing, functionally, we want to be successful with this building. And if light drives cognition in a lot of ways, and it does, then, you know, we got to pay attention to that. So yeah, I want to really dig into these numbers with you.
Yeah,
sure, absolutely.
I want to jump in a little bit. So if this was an entirely a wall of glass, we would probably still not hit that 55% target. And that's just the nature of school classroom design. They're very deep, and with that regard, the double loaded configuration. And LEED's metric is the whole entire floor plan. It's not a singular room. So when we have openings in corridors, that also helps activate and increase that autonomy. But that metric is a measure of light over time, the time that it's occupied. So we can continue to have that discussion. But
Thank you for clarifying that.
yeah.
Bill. So
I
do
know
wanna-
there are a couple hands up, but related to that, Bill, what are the proportions of these rooms for reference?
They vary.
Approximately.
Call them 25 by 30. They can change though, that configuration for sure.
Yeah, that's not terrible. I think if you looked at it with some interior light shelves that bounce the light,
Yeah,
specifically on the south side, but you know, in theory.
it's
you could
certainly the goal.
bounce-
Yeah,
I mean,
is the
yeah.
next layer.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, I agree on the light shelf idea. Anything we can do to bounce that number up is a good thing.
Absolutely. But I think that sort of one of our successes is the fact that we have a perfect north orientation. So some of the classrooms on the north side are not really going to benefit that much from a light shelf, but we certainly intend to use it on the southern orientation.
Great. So we'll get much more into the technical detail, but I do think that it's really important what Bill added about that it's the lead is an overall building floor plan and things like that. So we'll dive into that more and come back after the design subcommittee with some more information there. But I do want to get to Heather and Peter's questions. So maybe start with Heather. I think you've had your hand up longer.
Sure, thanks. Okay, so I'll keep mine pretty succinct. I'm just kind of sharing feedback because you were looking for feedback, so it's not even specific questions.
That's awesome. Yep.
And I won't get into the details of the numbers and everything, but I would echo the feedback that I just from glancing at this, and I know it's a rendered image, it feels like, oh, there could be more daylight. And so that's just kind of a gut reaction. And along with that I know you said the full one, the option one is somehow the most simple, but that one, the full windows strike me as a better environment. I will say that looking at 2, 3, and 4, I feel like I look in and say, oh, who put the whiteboard in front of the window? It's just this visceral reaction of like, oh, something's blocking the window, that it shouldn't be there. So my gut feels like the full windows and just more feel of daylight and more view is better. And then again, these are gut reactions on the outsides, looking at the patterns on the outsides and everything. I would agree. And I also think actually similarly on the outsides that the more confusing patterns can get a little confusing to the eye, especially once you put the sunshades and everything. On the brick patterns, I think that, I guess you call it diffusion, is one that I even pointed out last time as interesting. And now that I'm seeing it on the full building, I'm not sure that I like it so much. There were others that you've shown us that have more of a wood grain look and that kind of thing. And maybe to Matt's point about what's around us, I love the idea of echoing our natural environment and having things, even if we're not using wood that is harder to take care of, but things that have a natural wood or wood grain look would tie well into our environment and everything. And the last one was just didn't love the red, the bright red, again, back to kind of natural look and everything. So those are just my gut reactions.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll echo Heather's comments and some of the other folks' comments. I think the simpler design is better. I'm not a fan of the complex look. One of the concerns I have is putting a whiteboard there. If I'm a student, I'm going to be looking right at the windows. And that, to me, I immediately started thinking, oh, I don't know how bright the sun is going to be in. I know there's shading, but that wouldn't be ideal place to put a whiteboard. I realize you're trying to utilize space, but I'd rather have more daylight, simpler design. I'm also not a fan of that bright red. I like the grayscale that you showed. That was more appealing, and I think we can do some things there. So that's what I have.
So I see, Chris, I know you're on the design subcommittee, and we only have about 3 minutes left in order to reserve some time for new business and public comment. So I'm wondering if maybe Charlie and Chris, we can go to the design subcommittee with some more detail on that. And then maybe Pat, great, thank you. And maybe Pat, if you wanted to have a few last remarks, because I think what we're going to have to do, you and Cole team, is we're going to have to save the elevations, the next portion of the presentation for our next meeting.
That's perfectly fine. We'll revise some of those issues. We'll
Right.
revisit some of those issues and bring them up next.
Yeah, I
meeting.
think that's actually maybe a good strategy, because with the design subcommittee, maybe we can refine, hone in, and then provide an update that is more in the direction.
Sure.
So then Pat.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that Heather said, and I favor the simple pattern. I am curious as to any kind of studies or any kind of input that we might get for kids who have maybe some cognitive disorganization, which are most middle schoolers, that sort of, when I look at the facade with the very, very different windows, it kind of gets me disoriented. And I'm also, the floor to ceiling window, I think can be very disruptive for kids with some sensory issues. So I'm hoping that that's being taken into consideration too, in terms of the visual look for kids who might be coming into the building, trying to get themselves organized. Simple feels better to me.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so on that note, it's about 9:15, and I did want to hand it back to, maybe we close out the slides and hand it back to the co-chairs to entertain new business and public comment.
Thanks, Kristen. I think cash flow was our next item, and then it'll be new business and public comment. So I don't know, Ian, if you're prepared to do a quick cash flow update.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
There's actually no change in the cash flow since last week, but there was a request.
We love your dog.
I think we're still on Saul's screen.
That's Saul's dog, maybe. Yeah.
Oh, is that Saul's dog? He's a beauty.
Sorry about that. So somebody could share their screen.
Yeah.
You gotta stop sharing.
Trying to, but it won't let me.
All right.
Yeah, there you go. Yep. Okay, so no
there was
change
a
in
request.
cash flow? Yeah.
Yeah, there was a request just to show the projected payments for schematic design through the end of the year. So that's what this is here. So essentially, we've paid SMMA through June, and then these are the remainder of billings here, projected out through December of this year. So,
Ian, where is Hill in this documentation?
that's a good question. We have built out near 100% of our contract. So we haven't been submitting any invoices this year.
All right, so I'll ask the obvious question. Is this a pro bono affair until December?
I'll grab that with a little time. Ian, I don't mind answering and then you can chime in.
Sure.
Stephen was talking with Peter Martini. Is Peter on today?
He's out this week on vacation.
Yeah, I think there was going to be a discussion as we figure out where we are and et cetera, to see, because there's 300,000 left based on what's projected out, that could potentially fill some of this gap in compensation. So nothing's been decided. I think it's got to get brought to the committee for some discussion as we go. That's what Stephen let me know about.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions on cash flow? Hearing none. New business.
Is this where I bring up the correspondence from Mark?
Yeah, so Peter, Go ahead, Pat.
Well, I think that, and Don, help me with this if I'm going in the wrong direction. I think that what we need to decide as a committee is whether we're going to reopen the size of the gymnasium. This was something that we'd come to a conclusion on based on trying to fit within our budget constraints as well. I understand the desire on the part of the community, but I think this committee has to decide, are we going to reopen this conversation?
Was it actually voted on?
Conversation will, given, just let me finish, just given that this conversation will have a budget impact, that we haven't voted yet on the budget, but we are striving to get to that 100,000 number.
To answer the voting question, we approved the space summary with a vote with the understanding that the gym would meet the parameters. And I don't have the language. Matt Johnson had actually done the motion, I believe.
That the width of the cross courts would be constrained by the necessary length of the main court.
That's right. You good memory, Matt. So that's what's been decided. And then the memo on the 15th was what backed that up at the 9,568 square feet. So technically, Peter, it was voted with constraints, but not a physical number, if that's helpful.
Okay. Well, I guess the question is, can I bring it up?
I think what you can bring, I think the first step is to have the committee agree to reopen this discussion.
So
I would second that it should happen here. Otherwise, the design subcommittee doesn't know if this is territory for it to re-enter. And we don't want to if it's not in keeping with the will of the committee.
So therefore, should I put forth a motion?
Sure.
I think so.
All right, well, I'd put forth a motion to reopen the discussion on the gymnasium based on Mark's Caruso's request for safety reasons to increase or add 552 square feet so that we can increase the size of the on the cross court widths so that we can meet what he feels is a safe distance for athletes to practice simultaneously on those courts.
Okay, we have a motion.
So,
hold on, Pat. We have a motion. Is anyone going to second it?
Oh, we need.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. My computer crashed and I just got back in. What's the motion on the table?
The motion is to reopen the discussion on the size of the gym based on feedback we received from CCYB and specifically Mark Caruso as far as the cross-court runoffs specific to that. So Peter would like to continue that conversation and is suggesting that we reopen that topic for discussion. So he's made a motion and I'm looking for any seconds.
Okay, and sorry, it's the size of it's the total size of the gym versus like size of courts or something?
Effectively, it basically increases the cross-court runoff and the space in between the cross courts, as I understand it, and everyone got the email, so I'm just going off of memory, but changing that from 4 feet to 6 feet. And I think collectively it adds just over 500 square feet to the total size of the gym. As a general recap.
Okay, so the motion isn't
Kristen,
to do this. The motion is just to have a discussion about it.
Discussion, yeah. So hold on, Kristen, because I'm looking for a second on a motion.
Okay, I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? And I would say that, Kristen, if you have relevant information, I'll call on you for discussion.
Yeah, I did want to clarify that I think we shouldn't say that it's necessarily just 500 square feet. The email that I reviewed from Mark implied that there's also an end run out that needed to be reviewed. So it's not just the width but also the end.
I want to
Okay.
clarify that because I did have a discussion with him and he is okay with the length. He's okay based on the bleachers and the information he's gotten, but the width is his concern for safe practicing two teams. Because right now it's very minimal.
Perfect. Thank you, Peter, for following up on that.
So that effectively makes the gym longer because the cross courts affect the width of the runoff on the cross courts affect the overall length of the building. Okay. Any further discussion?
Well, this is Charlie. I guess, I would say that again, to frame this as a safety issue misses the point that you could reduce the size of the cross court and have, the runouts that you want. And the initial proposal was for a 42-foot wide cross court. And when that was expanded, that's what created the problem in the first place. So, safety can be addressed in two ways. You can make the whole gym bigger, or you can make the cross court smaller. And I think that the gist of the motion from Matt and the discussion and the meetings has been that we could make it smaller and provide some flexibility in determining, exactly how that space would be used. I think that's what we did. So, so you can accommodate the safety requirements by simply changing the width of those cross courts without really causing any significant issue to anyone. So that's my take on it. I think we've kind of been through this, and I think to continue to relitigate it is probably not, going to be in our best interest. So,
thank you, Charlie. I just want to call him. I think I see Matt and Pat's hands up. Matt Johnson.
I would just say that to accommodate this would basically override our previous vote where we made these decisions about the gym. And I would really not like to revisit this at this time, and would echo Charlie's sentiment that there are options here if safety is an overriding concern to make the courts narrower. They could be 44 feet. There's lots of different options that are available. So I would not want, this is not the time to be adding square feet to this building.
Thank you, Matt. Pat Nelson.
Thank you. So for me, the question of adding square feet is a budgetary question. So if someone could just give me a quick calculation, and I know that there are lots of other things that go into this, but if we were to add the 552 square feet that Peter's proposing, what does that add to the cost of the building?
it's probably at least $500,000.
Can I get a concurrence from anyone else? Not that I don't trust you, Charlie, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
I hadn't run that number, but I believe Ian had around 500.
If we're just talking about 552, just a rough estimate here on total project costs, which is the $699 a square foot all in. That's $385,000 that we're talking about here.
$385,000.
Can I provide a little additional?
Hold on, Charlie. Let Pat.
Charlie, wait a sec. So I think that's the question we're asking ourselves as a committee. Because there's, as I understand it, and Kristen can correct me if I'm wrong, the real constraining factor in terms of making the gym space bigger is that it's going to cost more. It's not that we're going to run out of space on the site or anything else. It's not going to squeeze out physically any other spaces, but it will squeeze out cost. And to me, I think that's what we're asking ourselves. We've gone through some arduous trimming of the project, including some things that I'm not thrilled about from an education point of view, but I understand and I accept that the educators are comfortable with it. But so I would have a hard time voting for this unless we were really prepared to go above our 100 million target. And unless we thought that the select board and the finance committee, which we've been kind of following their guidelines or following their suggestions, is going to be comfortable with this.
Pat,
Right, well-
I like your comments, and I think that the implication here is that if you add 400,000 of cost to this gym situation, you've got to take 400,000 out somewhere else beyond what we're already doing in order to make our $100 million number. So yeah, it's adding costs, but by adding costs, you have to sacrifice something else. And that's a very difficult thing to do.
All right, well, listen, it appears that the committee is not in general in favor of doing this. I just want to say that's not correct, Charlie. You're right. If your overriding goal is purely to hit that 100 million, okay. But if you're looking, I look at every decision and say, is money well spent? Am I getting value for the dollar spent? And for $300,000 or 400,000 or $500,000 to be able to get those two cross courts where two teams could play simultaneously for CCYB, when what we have in town is really not adequate, and this is going to be the primary place where they play. I look at that as a community citizen and say, to me, that is money that I think is well spent. So I will withdraw my motion, but I'd just like to hear from Justin first. And Justin, not that I'm asking you to counter anything, but what are your thoughts on the court size and safety and playing?
Yes, good morning. So I guess my response is primarily based in the school day, first and foremost. Our program of study in PE and health. And I do believe the gym size that the committee has voted on is more than adequate for our PE program. When you dip outside of the school day in our interscholastic program, I do know that while there might be a couple middle schools around that have two regulation courts, primarily the schools that we visit, and only has the one. So in terms of playing a regulation game under MIAA, the one that offers a spot for our families and our spectators is really the mindset that we have in our after school interscholastic program. Okay, so generally there would not be two teams practicing, and if they are, you don't have any issue on your end. It's more CCYB. Correct. The two teams practicing, again, as we all know, you don't need that spectator space for that. I do believe both teams can be practicing. In terms of gameplay under MIAA, to have both the girls team and the boys team to play at the same time is not, that's something that's not common in the middle school league that we're a part of. All right. Okay, so what we're sacrificing is for CCYB not being able to play really two games at once, and I get it. That's a community issue more than a school issue. So I will withdraw my motion, but I just want to go on record that I don't think we're doing this right. Thank you.
Peter, I appreciate you sparking that conversation, and definitely sensitive to the needs of the community as well as our budget. So it's not an easy decision for us. Okay, any other new business? Hearing none, I will call for any public comments. If you want to either go on camera, raise your virtual hand, speak up. No one? Okay. Just giving an extra minute. Okay. If there are no public comments, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. Any seconds?
Second.
I assume there's no discussion. I will call for a vote. Jared? Motion to adjourn?
He may have had to hop
Yes.
off.
Oh,
there he
oh,
is.
he's still here.
Yes.
Hey, Jared, thank you. Matt Johnson?
Aye.
Lori Hunter?
Yes.
Justin Cameron?
Yes.
John Harris?
Yes.
Peter, oh, I'm sorry, Russ Hughes.
Yes.
Getting ahead of myself. Peter Fishalis?
Yes.
Court Booth?
Yes.
Heather Bout?
Yes.
Frank Cannon?
Yes.
Chris Popoff? Did he leave? Charlie Parker?
Yes.
I think Matt Root had to leave us around 9, so I'm not gonna ask for him. Pat Nelson? Yep, she's waving, and I'm a yes. Thank you, everyone, for your time, for your input. So we'll see you at the next meeting. I think it's in a few weeks. So, and
Awesome.
subcommittees in the meantime.
Thank you.
All right, guys, have a great day.
Bye.
Enjoy the rain. Bye.
Don't mow the lawn.
Thanks,
rain.
design team.